Jim is America's crisis guru and actually just finished his 12th book, so he's a prolific author. Everybody, let's welcome Jim Lukaszewski.
It has been a long time, and Barbara and I left for New York in 1986. I went to work for a firm out there, and it was kind of another crazy economic time. I remember all of the business things going on in those days. That was Dayton Hudson was being traced by Dart Industries, and it was kind of a scary time. I actually worked for the company that was going to take over Dayton Hudson. But we lived there about 9.5 years, and we were flying back from someplace, and we were coming in over LaGuardia, and Barbara looks out the window. And by the way, Barbara is right back there. You can introduce you for it. Okay. My camp follower for almost 50 years this year. She looks out the window and she says, "It's beginning to look like home down there." And I said, "Well, we've been here 9.5 years. How long did you think we'd stay?" She said, "Well, we're from Robbinsdale. I thought we'd be here a couple of years and then we'd go home, We stayed for another 15 years. But it's great to be back. We moved back because Barbara's retired 3 years ago now. And her mom lives here, who's 97, lives out in Richfield. So it's nice to they bake cookies together most of their lives, except when we were gone. So now, rather than being 1,060 miles apart, we're 6 miles apart, and they bake cookies pretty frequently. My topic for today is this business of truth, and it's really based on the first statement in the Rotary creed, so to speak. And I'm, as they sort of explain, I'm in the truth-finding business. I'm a crisis person, and I meet people when something bad has happened. I rarely meet people in the general way, and typically when I do meet people who are in trouble, the first thing I want to say, they say to me, "Jim, I never thought I'd ever talk to you in my entire life, and I'm not very happy about it right now, When are you leaving, and when's it going to cost, and what do we have to do, right?" These are very stressful circumstances, and the problem with the whole situation is essentially that when you're in these sorts of circumstances, there are behaviors that we tend to look for. We talk about lessons you learn. Over the years, I actually have clients in all 50 states, most of Canada, some in South and Central America. I work a little bit in Europe, not a whole lot. But the thing that's so interesting about what I do is that, and because I look like I do, people say, "Jim, what are the trends you've seen over your lengthy career in crisis work?" And the answer is none. Say to myself, well, there's a puzzled look, and the reason is, unless they've slipped another commandment in when I wasn't looking, they'll still break in the same 10 every week. It's like they don't read the newspaper, they don't listen, and quite often I know of the people that I'm going to be working with, and my first question is probably the same question their mothers asked them. "What were you thinking?" So anyway, organizations, I tend to refer to them as perpetrators. If I use that word, my clients are perpetrators. They cause problems for others. They create victims for others. And inherently, in circumstances, there's contention, there's irritation, there's frustration. And the issue, from my perspective, is it gets increasingly difficult very quickly to find out what the truth actually is. It's interesting to me, too, that there are patterns for these sorts of things, and those are the patterns I look for. And interestingly enough, I was a Rotarian when I was here, and that was my first introduction, ironically, to compliance work. Because this is the questions you ask here are the same questions we ask in these circumstances. And these are pretty tough questions, and we only have time to deal with just the first one today, right? And it's, in my judgment, the most important question. Is it the truth? This is a tough question, because truth is complicated. And I want to start talking, we don't have a lot of time, but I want to talk to start by talking about what is truth, to begin with, okay? That's sort of a fundamental difficulty. Let me define truth for you to start with, so we kind of run the same wavelength. I define truth this way. It's 15% facts and data, and 85% emotion and point of reference. 85% essentially emotion. And the interesting thing about my work is that what my clients generally want to do to start with, and most perpetrators do, is to begin putting in place a factual case for what they did or didn't do. I have news for you. Facts are important in many circumstances, but when it comes to the truth, no, they matter to that level of 15%. Beyond that, it's about emotion. It's about your relationship to the circumstances going on. Let me just illustrate my concept with a little simple story. There's a car accident. Your neighborhood, the street corner, no big deal. It's early morning. And as it happens, the policeman comes by right away and begins to interview people on the corner. There were 4 corners and 4 people witnessed the crash. So as she gets the information, gathers the information, gets back in her car and looks at what she's found, she says, well, a couple people agree on how the cars were situated, but they disagree with other things. A couple people agree on the weather conditions at the time of the accident, but they disagree with other accounts. Another couple of people tend to agree on essentially, how the situation really came about, that sort of thing, and what happened shortly afterwards. And for everything else she's got from the witnesses, they agree on virtually nothing. Welcome to the world of eyewitness testimony, true? But we know a couple of things from what this policeman has done about the information she's gotten. We know, for example, about the level of truthfulness in the information she got from these witnesses. We know the information is true because these people have no reason to lie. They witnessed the accident, policeman came up and asked the question, they answered. But there's a second question, right? Well, if they told the truth, how come there's almost every account differs in some important respect? And the answer is point of reference. This is what makes truth so difficult. In this room, whatever the number of people is we have in this room, there's a different truth for every person in this room today based on what I'm talking about. It's complicated. Now, let me illustrate. Fox and CNN. I mean, they report the same news every day, but I mean, are we on the same planet, do you think? Wall Street Journal, New York Times, same news, but my God, in one particular, Obama's responsible for everything bad, and the other one, we can't figure out who's bad for anything, right? Guns versus no guns, abortion versus no abortion, taxes versus no taxes. I mean, it's confusing. 2014 is going to be one of those years. It's what we call the democracy testing exercise, referred to as an American election cycle. Okay? And I can't help but thinking back to 2012 when we had a presidential election, and we were asking ourselves, essentially, were the 2 main candidates combating at each other to run the same country? And by the way, whose country was it? Was it America? Those sorts of things, right? So you look for the same replay this year, and we're getting ready for next year. Actually, in 16. I have a client who killed 7 people. They knew it. Virtually everybody knew it. They were having great difficulty talking about it and doing what perpetrators should do. So I, as I always do, I come into the middle of things that have already happened. And I met with the chief executive, and we talked about the steps the company had to take to get this resolved. And so my first stop was the legal department. And as I went into the legal department, I was met by the general counsel, a woman actually who I knew. And she said, Jim, I just want to stop you before you talk to my people. It's about 9 attorneys. And I just want to remind you that this is not the empathy department. I said, well, Susan, if by the time I leave, this is still not the empathy department, there'll be new lawyers here on Monday to solve this problem, okay? It's sobering, it's interesting, but in essence, these are the kinds of things that we have to do to begin getting to the truth from every particular angle. There are some sort of realities of truth that you have to think about. In my business, there's tremendous amounts of disagreement and contention. Well, the opposite of disagreement and contention is agreement. Almost every person I work for, company I work for, somebody's mad at somebody probably for some pretty good reasons. So basically, I'm in what I call the waging peace business. Because the way we solve problems is not by arguing about them, it's by settling them, moving through the process. It is about trust, interestingly enough. It is about trust. And I define trust essentially as the absence of fear. And by the same token, I then define fear as the absence of trust. All in an effort to reduce this contention, which will allow us then to get to what the truth happens to be. I think all solutions to problems that we face, interestingly enough, come tomorrow. They don't come from today. But if you look at how we describe them, how we debate them, how we argue them, how we report them in the news media, we're always talking about yesterday. I mean, the news itself is always about yesterday. I mean, if you subscribe to a paper that talks about tomorrow accurately, I want to know who that is. Part of the issue in getting to the truth is recognizing that it's going to evolve from what we're talking about, not from what we did yesterday or the day before. If you want to argue and talk about things that happened yesterday, it's where you're going to be, and nothing will move forward. I've learned that the concept of apology is an extraordinary way to get to the truth. I define apology as the atomic energy of empathy. And we talk about empathy. What is empathy? Well, most of us learned that empathy was putting ourselves in the shoes of someone else and kind of appreciate their circumstances. How do you put yourself in the shoes of the families of 7 people killed by a company and say, I know how you feel? You can't. In fact, if you do that, it gets worse. But what you can do is do things for these people to help them deal with the circumstances they're facing. Empathy is about doing stuff. I'm a public relations person, and the old definition, well, maybe it's the current one for public relations, is do good, take credit for it. What I'm talking about is do good and let the good speak for itself. That's what empathy is. It's doing things that every culture I work in, has a phrase similar to, actions speak louder than words, and they always do. So most of my advice to my clients is to write less, but make it really matter. Say less, but make it really matter. But having said all of that, truthfulness is still difficult to find. So many things in our environment really have questionable truthfulness. I just made a list. One of my favorites is self-service. Somebody advertises self-service. What are they advertising? You get to do it yourself. What is that? I'm going on 72, and I'm pretty savvy about the equipment we're using these days and the technologies and that sort of stuff. But still, it sort of fries me when you have to, whenever you have a problem with a company or product or something, they send you to the website. I mean, look at Amazon. Actually, currently the most loved company in America, but you can't talk to a human being to save your soul at Amazon. It's all done on the web. Self-service means do it yourself. This one's probably a little raw, but non-profit organizations. Is this the truth? Well, actually, they get to be non-profit because somebody else pays their taxes and their other services for being in our society. It's a good thing, no question about it. And some nonprofits pay taxes because why? They have things that make a profit, so they have to pay taxes. But if you step back and look at this, and look at how we organize this sort of activity in our culture, I prefer to call these organizations for what they truly are, tax-subsidized organizations. We can argue about this later, but fundamentally, we put these labels on things, and they have an impact. We want to think through. Anything that says healthy is what? It's not going to be healthy, right? If it says smart, what do you know? You're going to be stupid, that's what. It's got a 95-page manual. One of my favorites is J.D. Power. You know, J.D. Power is the place that rates all these different services, and they put the big symbols on the airplane to get on a Continental, said the world's best airline, that sort of stuff. Well, if you've ever had your car repaired at a dealership, you actually learn how some services like J.D. Power's work. When you go to get your car, there's usually kind of a crudely, taped up piece of paper next to the cash register that says, whatever you do, when you get called by the manufacturer to rate our service, you must say excellent to every question. And with a big black marking check in the bottom says, if you can't say it's excellent, call us and we'll make it excellent. So what do these ratings mean? It's a put-up job. Totally put-up job. And on top of that, the reason you know this is because what? Do they ever publish a list of people who don't make it? I don't think so. Innovation is another one. Innovation, somebody always studied things. Innovation was used like 99,000 times in corporate annual reports last year. 99,000 times and variations. I guess my favorite of all, though, is clean coal. Forgive me, bud. Clean coal. I'm from Robbinsdale, maybe I don't know enough, but clean coal has always kind of bugged me anyway. The thing I've learned, too, is that the bigger the lie, interesting enough, the more obvious the truth turns out to be. I spent some time at Penn State. I've lectured there, written about their circumstance and that sort of thing. And they're sort of the model for how things not only can go wrong, but go wrong intentionally. If you recall the story briefly, two janitors happened to see the assaults going on some young people. When they went to report it, the boss said, hey, you report this, you're toast here. So they didn't say anything for 11 years. And the interesting thing about this is that, the thing you learn in my business is, if someone directs you, to the mailroom to get information, what have I learned? Problems like this never start in the mailroom. They don't know anything in the mailroom. When someone called me and said, Jim, we got this problem, we've got these people who are really angry at us. And I said, well, why are they angry at you? Gee, I don't know. Well, it's hard to help you if you don't know. By the way, where's your senior staff? Well, they're right next door. We've been working on this problem. I said, tell you what, lock the doors, start serving a lot of coffee and water, and don't let them go to the bathroom. And by 7 o'clock, someone will fess up, because somebody in that room knows what's going on and may be the person who caused it. In this case, it's so funny, you can't make this up. In this particular case, the guy called, the CEO of the company called, his name was also Jim. He called me at 7 o'clock and said, we know what's going on. I said, well, maybe we can figure this out. And we actually could figure it out. And it turns out to be what they often are. There was not the person in this room, but the people in this room knew about the person who was causing the disruption in the company, in the area of the company that they had problems in. Somebody always knows at the top. Always knows. All leaks from organizations come from the top. Again, the mailroom people don't know anything. What can they leak? It's always somebody. It's quite often the CEO, that or the general counsel. Lawyers are big leakers. It's an interesting thing. I wrote a chapter of a book about this. It came out. Okay. The thing I found about working with these really smart people is that they can do very dumb things and figure out ways not to talk about them, to avoid what they're responsible for and that sort of thing. And so over the years, I've developed a pattern of, it's actually a sort of a pattern of interrogation. Because in my business, one of the questions you get is, do you work for anybody who calls? I mean, just pick up the phone and say, Jim, we got a problem, come and see us. Well, no, there's a kind of an exercise you have to go through to qualify for me to work with you, okay? It's a series of 9 things you have to do. I'm just going to talk about a handful of them, but you get the circumstance. So, are they going to be candid with me about, are they going to tell me the truth? I define candor as truth with an attitude delivered now. I have to have a sense of that. Are they going to be open and accessible, or are they going to go down to Barbados while this thing transpires in the news media, right? Are they interested in empathy and apology? Apology. Remember, I defined apology as the atomic energy of empathy. Apology is the toughest thing leaders have to do, because they don't want to do this. Why don't they want to do this? Well, The biggest reason in my experience is what I call the sissy factor. They don't want their sorority sister or their fraternity brother to call them up and say, "Hey, what are you doing? The rest of us are hanging out here. Now you made it tougher for us because you apologized to these people." But apology does an amazing thing. It solves the problems victims have. And crisis is all about creating victims. So the major lessons I really learned about working in this field are, first of all, the truth is complicated. But the truth is what we have to find. So my work is really exclusively driven toward that perspective. And I'm dealing in circumstances where people really don't want to tell the truth. They will lie. They will lie to me, especially as I'm a communicator. Everybody lies to communicators. The difference between the average communicator and me is I've been at this a long time. So the moment they explain, they even mention what the situation is, I probably know more about it than they actually do. And I can lead them out of the jungle if they want. I don't know how many of you remember the show West Wing on I forget which channel it was on, but it was a great show for staff people because it was about advising important people who were in stressful circumstances, like the President of the United States. And the show was full of great lessons and great stories. One of my favorite stories was the young man who was the governor, the president's political person, was always in trouble with somebody. You know, every episode he's going to be fired for some reason. And in one particular episode, he had insulted a bunch of religious people, and there was a great tension about his being fired. He worked for Leo McGarry, who was the chief of staff for the president. They're walking down the hall of the White House in the West Wing, and this guy is really upset about things, and he's afraid he's going to be fired. And McGarry says, "Well, tell you what, let me tell you a story." Okay, so he's, guy walking down the street falls in a hole. It's a deep hole. And he is going to have a problem getting out of this hole. So he starts to shout. People walking by hear the voice, look down. He said, minister, rabbi, or a priest came by and wrote a little prayer on a piece of paper, dropped it down there. Somebody came by and said, "You shouldn't have trouble getting out of there." A bunch of people came by, well-meaning people. And then finally a friend he knew came by and jumped in the hole. And the guy says, "Well, this is smart. Now we're both in here." And his friend says, "Yeah, but I've been here before and I know the way out." That's what I do. That's what I've learned about. I know the way out. It's very, very interesting. Here are my sort of lessons. Disregard people who lie. You can always tell who the liars are. You really can. Disregard those people. I think it's possible and important to have some set of personal principles, no matter where they come from, against which you can judge what you're hearing, what you're seeing, and what's going on. You really have to be asking this question. Is it the truth? These are, I think, have come to me are four incredibly powerful words with a question mark after them. And it is an important lesson I've learned. And we only talk about one of the four steps in our code of behavior. If it is the truth, you will know. And the challenge is to act on it when you find it. Thank you very much.